Our story begins after strange creatures attacked the human world and destroyed the city they were in. Humans then tried to fight back using their modern weapons as much as they could. But suddenly, a giant monster appeared, so massive it blocked the sunlight. Our protagonist then appeared, gazing at it from afar, saying that ever since they got to know each other, they've been like one person in two different bodies. The giant monster then started attacking the other monsters and eliminating them with its fiery breath. The humans looked on, unable to believe what was happening, until a child among them screamed, saying there was someone there. The humans approached and thanked him for saving them. Our protagonist then stood, saying to himself that ever since he saved his city, he's been treated like its ruler. To understand how all of this began, we must go back to the past, specifically to the year 2224, when there was breaking news about a zoo in Ning City being attacked by a snake over 100 meters long. Up until that moment, the authorities were unable to identify the snake's species or its actual size. It was also confirmed that a giant whale-like monster appeared in the northern skies of the city, photographed by numerous citizens. Due to the presence of these monsters, several internationally wanted criminals managed to escape from Ning City as the authorities were preoccupied with the recent events. Shortly after, our protagonist appeared injured in his arm and unconscious. While unconscious, he found himself able to see his injured body. Confused, he wondered what was happening and how he could see himself. Looking into a mirror in front of him, he was shocked to find himself in the body of a small creature. Dazed, he questioned whether he was dreaming or had truly transformed into a marine iguana. Trying to recall what had happened before this transformation, we learned that he was Chunjua, a second-year student at Ning University, who rented an apartment off-campus because he disliked the restrictive rules of university dormitories. One day, he heard that a pet store had received a unique collection of creatures. Being fond of amphibians, he was immediately drawn to a marine iguana and chose it as soon as he saw it. Iguanas are known for their gentle and calm nature, as well as their vibrant, lively colors, unlike other animals. Additionally, he preferred cold-blooded animals because of their vivid hues. After taking the iguana to his apartment, it broke out of its container and began attacking him for no apparent reason. Later, we discover it attacked him due to fear of a scorpion beneath it, triggered by its defensive instincts. Chen then grabbed his phone and struck the iguana on its head to get it away from him. But as soon as it let go of his arm, it quickly coiled its body and struck him on the head with force, knocking him unconscious. We then return to Chen as he gradually regains consciousness. Upon waking, he returned to his original body, looked at the iguana, and assumed he had been dreaming. Getting up, he noticed the lizard mimicking his movement. Raising his hand, the iguana raised its hand too. Thrilled, he couldn't believe he could control the lizard's body. He remarked how moving its arm felt identical to moving his own and wondered if this was what they called mental control, like in the movies. He began contemplating what he could do with his newfound ability to control the iguana's body. Should he start a live stream showcasing the intelligence of lizards, or use it to hunt fresh abalone or sea cucumbers? And then he gets discouraged and says it seems he's celebrated for nothing because no matter what he does, he won't be able to become a hero using it since, after all, it's just a small lizard. While he's holding it up, both of them feel hungry, and he says that from the shock, he forgot that he had been unconscious the whole day. Then she wonders about the food that iguana creatures eat, so she climbs onto his arm, and he tells her that he remembered that marine iguanas and lizards like to eat meat. He then starts preparing the food, telling the iguana not to worry because he's a skilled chef. After serving her the dish, she looks at it, thrilled, and starts eating voraciously. Chen watches her, delighted, and says he was sure she'd like it. But suddenly, a system window appears in front of him, congratulating him on his clone gaining 5 evolution points from eating the meal. It also informs him that his physical stats have increased by 0.5 point. Chen looks at the system, stunned and confused by the message. The system then displays his status details. From this, he learns that his level is 0, his physical stats are 8.5, his spirit points are 12, and his talent is listed as mind control. His traits are energy perception and outer aura, both at the beginner level, requiring 1,000 experience points to level up. As for his skills, he has 3 at the beginner level: limb boxing with 48 out of 100 points, cloud leap with 66 out of 100 points, pulsating kick with 39 out of 100 points. Meanwhile, the iguana's evolution count is 0, with 5 out of 200 evolution points. Chen then wonders aloud if this is some kind of talent cheating system. Looking at his arm, he says, "So that means I can get stronger by using it." He remembers his father's words during martial arts training: if you keep punching randomly without focusing on the basics, it's as if you've learned nothing. Plant your feet firmly on the ground because the power of your punch comes from your stability when delivering it. However, Chun couldn't endure the training and asked his father for a break, saying he could no longer stand. His father refused, saying, "Only a coward quits halfway through training." "Are you a coward?" Chun replied, "No," and continued training. His father then instructed him to run around the training ground as fast as he could. Chun obeyed and started running, but while running, he tripped over a rock and fell. Lying on the ground, panting heavily, he said he couldn't even stand anymore. His father approached and told him to get up and continue training, reminding him that no one would help him when he grows up. Later, his father handed him a strange box, saying it contained all his savings. He explained that he was leaving on a long journey and didn't know when he would return, so Chen would have to live on his own until then. He asked Chen not to neglect the martial arts training he had taught him because when he becomes strong enough, he will be able to see the other side of the world they live in. Chen cried, asking how he would find him when he grew up. His father replied, "When you're strong enough, you'll find me." He apologized for not being able to stay with him until then and left. Returning to the present, Chun gazes at a photo of himself with his father and says quietly to himself that it's been such a long time since the last time he saw him. After the iguana finished its meal, it moved across the table. Chun watched it and remarked, "Despite its size, it's surprisingly fast at eating." As it moved, a strange light suddenly appeared on its body, and it began to grow larger. Chun stared at it, astonished by what was happening. He quickly checked the system for answers and discovered that the iguana had gained 15 evolution points after eating the food. He then said quietly to himself, "Wait a minute. Does this mean my physical stats have also increased?" He looked at himself in the mirror, puzzled, and lifted his shirt, noticing his abdominal muscles had become visible. "So, it seems I'm linked to the iguana, just like the system said. Any points it gains are reflected on me too," he mused. Looking at the iguana, he said, "If I keep developing it, I'll gain even more points from it until it becomes a giant monster like the one I saw in my dream." With excitement, he hurried to the supermarket to buy as much meat as possible. At the store, Chun asked the butcher for 10 kilograms of premium boneless beef and 20 kilograms of lean, boneless pork, all packaged. The butcher asked him if he would pay in cash or via QR code. Chen responded, "Who carries that much cash? Of course, I'll pay with a QR code." After completing the payment, he loaded the meat into his car and said to himself, "This should be enough for its development. Though, I'm close to going broke after spending this much." Back at his apartment, Chen prepared a large quantity of food and called the iguana over to eat. He then said to himself, "Once it finishes all this food and gains more evolution points, I'll become even stronger in martial arts." The iguana appeared, thrilled by the sight of the massive amount of food, and started devouring it rapidly until it had eaten everything. Chen frowned, disappointed, realizing it hadn't evolved. "Of course, it wouldn't be that easy. Looks like I'll have to buy even more beef next time," he said. The iguana then moved toward the window and sat there. Chen headed to his training room, wondering about his progress, and began punching the boxing bag. After 2 hours of intense practice, the system congratulated him on gaining 5 experience points for his hard work. Delighted, Chen realized his physical stats had significantly improved, and his training regimen had become much easier thanks to the system's point. 2 days later, Chen continued training tirelessly. Exhausted, he remarked, "There's nothing like the feeling of strength after intense training." He then prepared to deliver a powerful kick to the boxing bag. When he struck it, the bag shattered and flew across the room. The system updated his status. Level 0. Physical stats, 28 point. Spirit points, 16 point. Talent, mind control. Traits, external aura and energy perception, both beginner level, 10/1000 experience points. Skills, limb boxing, intermediate level, 48 out of 100 points. Cloud leap, beginner level, 66 out of 100 points. Pulsating kick, beginner level, 39 out of 100 points. As for the iguana, its evolution count remained at 0, but its evolution points had increased to 195 out of 200. Chen smiled, proud of his achievements over the past 2 days, and said, "If I keep this up, I'll soon be at the top of the Ming world in martial arts." He then recalled his father's words about the martial arts world being divided into 3 realms: Ming, Dark, and Transformation. His father explained that the pinnacle of the Ming realm allowed someone to defeat 10 opponents simultaneously, while the Dark Realm was reserved for elite individuals capable of facing 100 opponents at once, usually nobles from prestigious families. And as for the first transformation realm, it's for the legendary individuals who can face 1,000 opponents at once. They're called the Masters, but unfortunately, they're very rare these days because of how difficult it is to reach that level of power. As for the complete transformation realm, it grants a person an invincible body, but it has only been mentioned in ancient text. Then he asks his father which stage he managed to reach. His father replies, saying that he recently reached the Dark Realm. But before he can finish his words, Chen interrupts saying, "That's absolutely incredible." He then asks, "Since you've reached that realm, does that mean you're from one of the legendary families?" His father freezes in shock for a moment when he hears that and doesn't know how to respond. Finally, he says, "I'm just a regular guy from Luotuan, nothing more." We then return to Chen's apartment after he's finished his training. The moment he steps inside and sees the iguana on the couch, he feels thrilled because she's so close to evolving. Laughing, he says, "She only needs one more meal, and then I'll evolve too." He hopes she evolves soon so he doesn't have to buy her any more meat. He serves her another meal, and as she eats, her evolution points steadily increase until they hit 199 out of 200. At that moment, Chen says to himself, "I can't wait any longer to see how her body changes after evolving." With one last dish to go, she eats it, and as soon as she finishes, her evolution points hit 200 out of 200. Then the system appears, announcing that the evolution process is about to begin since the iguana has fulfilled all the requirement. The evolution process starts immediately. Her outer skin begins to peel off, and she feels intense pain. Chen suddenly experiences the same pain in his left arm, and his body begins evolving as well. The iguana's spikes start growing larger along her back, and her pain intensifies as her size increases. Overwhelmed by the pain, she charges around the apartment, destroying everything in her path. After the evolution is complete, Chen is lying on the floor, breathing heavily, saying, "I didn't expect the evolution process to be this painful." While he's still lying there, he hears a loud crashing sound coming from his room. He rushes over and finds that the iguana has completely destroyed his room. Approaching her, he says, "Let's see just how far we've evolved this time." He then uses his mental control ability on the iguana, commanding her to strike the punching bag with her tail. She obliterates the punching bag with one hit, sending it flying across the room. Staring at the iguana, Chen says, "Her strength has far exceeded what I imagined." He opens the system to check his new stats and finds that his physical attributes have increased from 28 points to 56, and his spiritual energy has risen from 16 points to 18. As for his talent traits in mental control, both his external aura and chi perception have doubled in experience points, from 10 to 20. His skills, however, remain unchanged. As for the iguana, she's officially reached level 1, but now she needs 1,000 evolution points to reach level 2. Chun looks at the system and says, "I expected to improve significantly when my clone evolved, but I didn't expect the changes to be this drastic, to the point where my physical attributes and traits doubled at once." He wonders if this massive evolution is because his body was too weak and couldn't keep up with the clone's evolution, causing it to double, or if every time his clone evolves, his traits and physical attributes will double as well. Laughing, he says, "If it's the first case, my physical strength will improve in no time. But if it's the second case, my power will become so terrifying I can't even imagine it." He releases his aura and says, "By martial arts standards, I've definitely reached the Dark Realm now, where I can fully unleash my external energy." He then asks himself if that officially makes him a martial arts expert. Releasing even more of his aura, he begins to think about how he can speed up his evolution even further. He says, "Even if I train all day, the maximum experience points I can gain is 100. Then he recalls his bond with the iguana and how her improvements reflect back on him. He looks at her and thinks about using her to accelerate his physical enhancements since all her progress is mirrored onto him. As he's gazing at her, he's utterly shocked to discover that she can now use her external aura. And suddenly, a person appears, banging on the door forcefully. Chen goes to him and asks why he's knocking in such an annoying way. But as soon as the person sees him, he nearly dies of fear and can't respond to him. Then he wonders to himself who this child is and why his whole body has been trembling since he opened the door for him. The person eventually manages to reply, saying he's his neighbor and came because of the loud noises coming from the apartment. He asks if he's renovating the apartment, which could explain all the noise. Chen apologizes for the loud sound and tells him he was practicing martial arts and didn't realize the noise from his training was that loud. The person is shocked by this response and says to himself, "What kind of training makes that much noise? It's like an earthquake hit the building." He then asks for permission to see the place where he trains. Chen agrees and shows him the room, but as soon as the neighbor looks inside, he sees it completely destroyed. Shocked, he wonders if this is really the result of a normal person's training. He gets scared, apologizes for interrupting the training, and asks him to train differently next time so the building doesn't collapse on them. The neighbor then runs toward the elevator. Chen apologizes again, assuring him that he'll adjust his training method and that there won't be any more loud noises. The neighbor thanks him and leaves. As soon as the elevator door closes, the iguana lizard comes out, standing next to Chen, looking hungry. Chen takes her inside, closes the door, and looks around, saying he needs to fix this place as soon as possible. Then he looks at the lizard and comments on how big she's gotten, realizing it won't be safe to keep her in the apartment much longer. He starts thinking about releasing her into the sea. Getting into his car, he asks the lizard if she's ready for the next stage of her evolution, and then they appear after arriving at the sea. As soon as they get out of the car, the lizard heads straight for the water. Chen then activates his external aura and energy sense, linking it to the iguana as it enters the sea. The lizard dives into the water, and Chen feels every movement it makes while swimming. He comments that using his energy sense allows him to stay connected to the lizard within a radius of 10 meters in all directions. He notices the fish swimming around and becomes fascinated by a fish with 5 eyes, declaring it his first target. He charges toward it at full speed, terrifying the fish. It quickly creates a barrier of foam around itself and swims away. Chen stops in his place, saying, "Good move, but unfortunately, there's nowhere to run." He charges at it again and manages to catch it with his jaws, eating it immediately. The system then appears, congratulating him on earning 10 evolution points for his mutant and gaining 1 point in his physical constitution. Chen continues his hunt for mutated fish, remarking that the points he earns from eating these fish are far better than what he gains from eating meat. He looks around, surprised by the large number of mutated creatures, and says, "It seems the news on TV was true. The human world is heading for a major catastrophe when these creatures become active." He then attacks another mutated fish and eats it. The system appears again, informing him that his clone has reached its daily evolution point limit of 100 points, and he won't get any more daily evolution points. Then Chen appears watching the fish around him, and says that vision through the eyes of an iguana underwater at night is much better than human vision. After that, he appears holding his breath and says that although the marine iguana is considered an amphibious creature, it relies heavily on its lungs for breathing, so it needs to come out of the water every now and then to catch its breath. Then he searches for a place to live, and while searching, he finds an underwater cave. He immediately heads to it, comes out of the water to catch his breath, and then says to himself that this place is excellent for an iguana to live in because it would be difficult for someone to discover it easily. Then Chen disconnects his link to the lizard and returns to his original body, saying that it's very late and he must return to his apartment quickly.